The castle of Lord Aldrich was ancient, towering above the snowbound peaks like a sentinel. Its stones, weathered by centuries of storms, bore the weight of secrets that could never be spoken aloud. The year was 1492, and the royal court of the kingdom of Valsoria, ruled by King Aldrich the Old, was filled with opulence, but also an unsettling chill that seemed to permeate even the grandest feasts. The kingdom's most mysterious figure was not its king, nor its queen, but the pale maiden of the Alps, Princess Adalyn, a beauty whose fair skin seemed almost unnatural, her lips so thin they appeared as a faint line, her eyes the color of a winter dusk. There was something strange about her, something people couldn't quite place. Her eyes held the weight of a sorrow none could understand, and her presence was often more felt than seen. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, the apple of her father's eye, but also a puzzle. While the court celebrated the lavish feasts, Adalyn never seemed interested in the festivities. She preferred silence, the darkness of the corridors, and the soft whisper of the wind against her window at night. Rumors swirled like the autumn leaves around her. She was a sorceress, cursed by the spirits of the mountains. Some even whispered that her beauty had come at the cost of her soul. Yet, despite the whispers, Princess Adalyn had no rivals. Her father, King Aldrich, adored her, though he was a man of few words. He showered her with gifts, but none more lavish than the collection of jewels from the farthest reaches of the kingdom. And it was these jewels, shimmering with an unnatural glow, that began to fuel the rumors that would haunt the royal court for generations. Princess Adalyn was a collector, not of flowers or fine fabrics, as would be expected of a princess. No, her obsession lay in the bones of the dead. She would visit the crypts beneath the castle at night, the heavy oak doors creaking as she entered, her lantern casting flickering shadows against the cold stone walls. She kneeled before the mounds of forgotten remains, soldiers from battles long lost, nobles whose names had faded from memory, and select from their skeletal remains. It was said she'd hold a bone in her delicate hands, turning it over in reverence before fastening it into a necklace, or carving it into an intricate brooch. No one knew why she did it. Some believed she had the ability to commune with the dead, that she sought to capture their whispers in her macabre jewelry. Others whispered that she sought to unlock the secrets of immortality, but no one dared ask. The princess's cold beauty was matched only by her chilling silence. The court, though uneasy, remained silent. After all, who could question royalty, especially one with such an eerie, almost ethereal presence? But one winter evening, as snow drifted heavily against the castle walls, a tragedy would unfold that would reveal the depths of Adalyn's obsession. A tragedy that no one could have foreseen, but which would forever haunt the kingdom of Valsoria. It began with a mysterious disappearance of a young noblewoman, Lady Seraphine, who had been a close companion to Princess Adalyn. She was last seen entering the princess's chambers after nightfall, her face pale, her expression strange, as if she knew something the others didn't. The next morning, she was gone. No trace remained of her, save for a single bone that appeared on the princess's vanity, a bone that looked strikingly familiar to Lady Seraphine's own. The court, rattled by the disappearance, sought answers. Whispers of foul play began to grow louder. But when King Aldrich, the ever-quiet monarch, questioned his daughter, he found no comfort in her response. "I have done nothing," Adalyn had said, her voice as cold and distant as the mountains that loomed beyond the castle walls. Her eyes, so cold, so empty, told a different story. But the princess's secrets were buried beneath layers of lies, and Lady Seraphine's disappearance was just the beginning. As winter gripped the castle, the tension in the court thickened like the frost that covered the castle's windows. The disappearance of Lady Seraphine had unsettled many, but the whispers grew bolder as the days passed. There were those who suspected the truth. Perhaps Adalyn had played a role in the young noblewoman's vanishing, but fear kept their tongues still. After all, to question the princess was to invite suspicion onto oneself, and there were rumors of something darker than mere obsession at play. Princess Adalyn's habits were becoming more erratic. Her visits to the crypts increased. She was often seen entering the depths of the castle alone, her lantern casting long shadows against the walls as she disappeared into the blackness. What was she searching for? What did she hope to find? No one could say for certain, but the air around her seemed to grow colder with each passing day. The king, though deeply concerned, could not bring himself to confront his daughter with any force. He loved her in his own cold way, but there was something in Adalyn's gaze, something otherworldly, that unnerved him. His once beloved daughter was no longer the sweet child he had raised. There was a darkness within her now, something that seemed to twist her soul and drain her humanity. Yet he remained silent, a prisoner to the strange hold she had over him. But it wasn't just the king who noticed the change. Lady Verena, a distant cousin of the royal family, arrived at court during the winter festivities. Known for her sharp wit and curiosity, Verena soon became fascinated by the rumors surrounding Princess Adalyn. She, unlike many, was not afraid to question the princess's peculiar behavior. One evening, as the moon hung heavy and pale in the sky, Lady Verena ventured down into the castle's bowels to uncover the truth. She had heard the stories how the princess would spend hours in the crypts, surrounded by bones, murmuring to herself in a language no one recognized. What could this mean? Was she practicing witchcraft, as some had suggested? As Lady Verena descended into the cold stone halls of the crypt, the air grew thick and musty, the walls lined with the bones of the forgotten. Her footsteps echoed loudly in the silence, every sound amplified in the empty space. The shadows seemed to shift and stretch as if they had a life of their own. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. A sense of dread crept over her, a chill that sank into her very bones. Then, as she turned a corner, she froze. There, at the far end of the crypt, was Adalyn, kneeling before an altar of bones. She was whispering something softly, her voice barely audible, the words unintelligible. Her hands moved with practiced precision, arranging bones into intricate patterns. On the ground around her lay a circle of skeletal remains, each one carefully placed, as if creating some sort of ritualistic boundary. The sight was chilling, and Lady Verena's breath caught in her throat. It was then that she saw something gleaming in the princess's hands. A necklace fashioned from human bones, each one delicately carved and polished. But this was no ordinary jewelry. The bones, though fragile, seemed to glow with an unnatural light. It was as if they pulsed with some dark, otherworldly energy. Lady Verena felt her heart race. She had come too far. The princess was not merely collecting bones for decoration, she was using them for something far more sinister. Was it magic? Was it some kind of cursed ritual? Before Lady Verena could retreat, a voice stopped her. "You should not be here." Adalyn's voice was quiet, but it rang out like a death knell in the cold, empty space. Lady Verena turned, her eyes wide in horror. The princess was standing now, her face pale and unreadable, her eyes dark and fathomless. "I see," Lady Verena said, her voice trembling. "It is true, then. You collect their bones. But why?" Adalyn didn't answer immediately. She simply stared at her cousin, her lips curving into a thin, almost imperceptible smile. "Not just any bones," she whispered. "The bones of the powerful, the ones who were once mighty. Their strength is in their remains." A shiver ran down Lady Verena's spine. You're making jewelry from their bones?" Adalyn nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving her cousin. Jewelry, yes, but it is more than that. These bones are vessels of power. They speak to me. They tell me things. The air grew colder still as the princess continued. I wear their strength, Lady Verena. Their spirits guide me, and soon they will guide me to something greater, something beyond the limits of this world. Lady Verena's mouth went dry. You're playing with forces you don't understand, she whispered. Adalyn's smile grew wider, more predatory. No, I understand perfectly. The realization struck Lady Verena like a blow to the chest. The princess wasn't merely obsessed with the dead. She was trying to harness their power, twisting it to her own dark purposes. This wasn't a mere collection of bones. It was a ritual, a descent into something far darker. And in that moment, Lady Verena knew that the princess's descent had only just begun. The whispers in the court grew louder with each passing day. Lady Verena, having narrowly escaped the crypts, fell ill with fever. She barely ate, her mind haunted by the chilling words of her cousin. Adalyn's power was no longer confined to the bones she wore as jewelry. It had seeped into the very air of the castle, poisoning everything it touched. King Ordric, ever distant, had begun to notice the unsettling changes within the castle's walls. The servants spoke in hushed tones of the unnatural cold that seemed to follow his daughter. The animals in the royal stables had become skittish and sickly, and the once pristine gardens wilted under an invisible weight. Even the stars seemed dimmer, their light blocked by an unseen shadow. In the still of the night, Adalyn retreated deeper into the castle's forgotten chambers, far from the prying eyes of the court. Her obsession with the bones grew stronger. No longer content with mere relics, she sought something greater, something that would grant her unimaginable power. She had heard rumors of an ancient artifact, a cursed relic known as the Vein of the Mountain. It was said to hold the ability to bind the spirits of the dead, to draw their power into the living, making them immortal. The artifact had been hidden deep within the mountains for centuries, guarded by ancient wards, and lost to time. But Adalyn's will was unyielding. She had already begun her search for it, enlisting the help of an old and mysterious sage, a man known only as the Warden. His true name was lost to history, but it was said he had been a keeper of dark secrets for as long as the mountains themselves had stood. The Warden had made a pact with Adalyn, one of convenience, if not trust. He knew she sought power, but he had his own dark purposes. In exchange for leading her to the artifact, Adalyn promised him something far more valuable than riches or land, her very soul. He had seen in her a hunger that mirrored his own, a hunger that could only be fed by the dark forces that lay hidden beneath the earth. As Adalyn journeyed with the Warden, leaving the castle behind, her mind swirled with thoughts of the Vein of the Mountain. She could already feel the power building within her. The bones she wore, those of kings and warriors, saints and sinners, had begun to hum with an eerie energy. The spirits, once trapped in their mortal vessels, had stirred to life. They whispered their secrets to her, their desires, their regrets. It was intoxicating, almost maddening. They warned her too. They warned her that there was no going back from the power she sought, that the Vein of the Mountain was not a gift, but a curse. But Adalyn's ambition was beyond caution. She was no longer the Princess of Valsoria. She was something far greater, something far darker. The Warden led her deeper into the heart of the Alps, where the snow was so thick it blocked the sun's rays. They traversed narrow paths carved into the cliffs, each step more treacherous than the last. The winds howled like the lost souls of the mountains, and the air grew thin with each passing hour. It was said that the mountain was alive, that it could sense when someone sought to claim its secrets. And the deeper they went, the more Adalyn could feel its eyes upon her. At the heart of the mountain, hidden within a cavern bathed in an eerie, unnatural light, they found it the Vein of the Mountain. The artifact was no mere relic, It was a twisted, gnarled root that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Its surface was slick with black moss, its veins running like rivers of ink through its twisted form. It looked almost alive, as if it had grown from the very heart of the earth. Adalyn approached it with trembling hands. The warden, standing in the shadows, watched her intently, a thin smile curling at the edges of his lips. "You found it," he said softly. "Now, take it. Claim your power." Adalyn hesitated. The air around her seemed to grow heavier, the weight of the mountain pressing down on her chest. Her hands shook, but her desire for power overruled any fear that might have lingered. With a deep breath, she reached out and grasped the artifact. As her fingers made contact with the vein of the mountain, the ground beneath her feet trembled. A deafening roar echoed through the cavern, as if the mountain itself were waking from a long, restless slumber. The darkness within the roots pulsed violently, and the spirits she had enslaved, those she had bound to her jewelry, screamed in unison, their voices filling her mind with a torrent of pain and anguish. For a moment, Adalyn faltered. She could feel the power surging through her, but it was not the divine strength she had expected. It was something far darker. The spirits fought to break free from their prison, their wrath burning through her very soul. And then it happened. A shadow erupted from the depths of the mountain, taking form in the shape of a monstrous figure, half human, half spectral, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It was the guardian of the vein, a creature born of the mountain's ancient wrath, bound to protect the artifact at all costs. "You should never have come here," the creature's voice boomed, shaking the very walls of the cavern. "This power is not meant for mortals." Adalyn's vision blurred as the creature lunged toward her, its claws raking through the air. In that moment, she realized the true price of her ambition. The vein of the mountain had not offered her power, it had enslaved her. The warden, watching from the shadows, knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. As Adalyn screamed in terror, the guardian descended upon her. The cave collapsed, and the mountain's fury unleashed its full wrath. The deafening roar of the mountain guardian echoed through the cavern, shattering the air around Adalyn. Her grip on the vein of the mountain tightened, but instead of power, she felt only a suffocating darkness clawing at her soul. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her limbs growing heavy as if the very weight of the mountain was pressing down upon her. The creature's form was nightmarish, its eyes glowed with a fiery red hue, and its body seemed to shimmer and distort, neither fully solid nor completely spectral. Its monstrous hands reached out, fingers like talons scraping the stone as it closed in on her. Adalyn tried to move to escape, but her body betrayed her. The power that had once seemed so alluring had turned into a vice, trapping her in place. Her chest constricted, her heart pounding as she realized the full extent of her mistake. It was too late. As the guardian's claws sank into her shoulders, she let out a strangled cry. The pain was unbearable. It felt as if her very essence was being torn apart. She could feel the spirits she had enslaved, those bones she had so carefully crafted into jewelry, howling in fury within her, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of agony. They were not guiding her anymore. They were punishing her. The warden, watching from the shadows, made no move to intervene. His eyes glinted with cold satisfaction. He had never intended to help Adalyn. He had merely used her. She had been a tool, nothing more. The promise she had made to him, her soul in exchange for the artifact, had been the true price of her ambition. Adalyn's mind swam with images, flashes of her past life, moments of fleeting joy, her father's cold but caring embrace, the peaceful nights she had spent as a child in the castle, before the darkness had consumed her. The horror of it all hit her like a wave, overwhelming her senses. Then, in an instant, everything went silent. The guardian, its claws still embedded in her flesh, stepped back. A deep, rumbling voice filled the cavern. "You were warned, child. Power always exacts a price. Now, you shall serve as a vessel for that prize." Adalyn's eyes fluttered open, her head spinning as the cavern around her seemed to warp and distort. The air was thick, suffocating. The spirits within her, once lost and quiet, began to surge again. But this time, they were no longer tame. They were furious, vengeful. They clawed at her from the inside, threatening to break free and consume her entirely. The vein of the mountain, the artifact she had so eagerly claimed, was no longer in her hands. It was gone, slipping into the darkness as the guardian withdrew into the depths of the mountain. But its power remained, burrowing into Adalyn's very being. A soft, cold voice whispered in her ear, as though from a far-off place. "You have become one with the mountain, princess." The warden's voice followed, but it was edged with something darker, something twisted. "Now you are a part of it. Your soul will never be free. The spirits will consume you, and with them, you will rule for a time. But remember this, there is no escape from the mountain's curse." The once proud Princess of Valsoria, whose beauty had mesmerized the court, now lay broken in the cold mountain cavern, her body trembling as the darkness began to consume her. The last vestiges of her humanity slowly ebbed away, her very essence becoming bound to the spirits she had once enslaved. She had sought immortality, power, and dominion, but instead, she had found only damnation. The warden turned to leave, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He had played his part. Adalyn was now a puppet of the mountain, trapped in a curse that would span eternity. The royalty of Valsoria would never know what had truly happened to their beloved princess. They would believe her lost to the treacherous depths of the Alps, her disappearance another mystery swallowed by time. But the truth was far darker. The castle in Valsoria remained, silent and still, its walls now inhabited by a lingering chill. The bones Adalyn had so carefully collected, those trophies of her twisted obsession, lay forgotten, scattered across the royal chambers. They had been part of her collection, but now they were nothing more than relics of a doomed princess's legacy. As time passed, those who dared venture near the castle spoke of strange occurrences. The air grew colder the closer they got to the castle, and those who lingered too long could hear the faint whispers of voices on the wind. Some said the spirits of the mountain had followed Adalyn, and that they now roamed the halls of her former home, waiting for someone foolish enough to claim what she had left behind. The royal court, still shrouded in secrecy, would never speak of Princess Adalyn again. But deep in the heart of the Alps, her soul remained trapped, an eternal prisoner of the vein of the mountain, bound forever to the spirits she had sought to control. Years passed, but the shadow of Princess Adalyn's story never fully faded. Though her name was not spoken aloud, the kingdom of Valsoria could never escape the weight of her legacy. The royal family, now ruled by King Aldric's son, King Thorian, tried to bury the painful chapter. But some stories are too dark, too powerful, to be erased by time. As the decades wore on, the castle was abandoned. It was no longer a place of grandeur, but a hushed ruin, its crumbling walls only whispering the horrors of the past. The town below the Alps still remembered the old legends, though. Travelers spoke of the eerie silence that surrounded the castle, of how the night air grew unnaturally cold as they passed its gates. But the most unsettling thing was the occasional sound of whispers, faint yet unmistakable, carried by the wind. These whispers were always the same: "Return what was taken." The inhabitants of the village avoided the castle, fearing it might be cursed, haunted by the vengeful spirits of the mountain, bound to the forsaken princess. Even the bravest souls could not shake the chill that settled into their bones as they neared the castle. Yet one group of adventurers, bold and curious, came to the village one fateful winter, eager to uncover the truth. They were scholars, historians, some of them. Others simply thrill-seekers hoping to find treasure in the ruins. They had heard the rumors of the lost princess and her cursed artifacts, and they were determined to uncover what had become of her. The village elders warned them against it, but the scholars paid no mind to the superstitions of the villagers. Thus, they set out toward the abandoned castle in the dead of night, unaware that their curiosity would soon lead them into the heart of a nightmare. The air was thick with fog, and the castle loomed ahead like a shadowed beast, its silhouette barely visible against the moonlit sky. As they passed through the iron gates, an unnatural silence gripped them. No birds, no rustling of leaves, only the sound of their footsteps crunching in the snow. The castle stood frozen in time, its broken windows dark and empty. Inside, the air was damp and cold, a constant reminder of the centuries that had passed. The adventurers lit their torches, their flames flickering against the stone walls. They walked down the long, forgotten corridors, their voices echoing in the stillness. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon the first sign that something was wrong. In a grand chamber at the castle's heart, they found a collection of bones delicately arranged, almost artfully placed. Some were strung together with fine threads, others intricately carved into strange shapes. Jewelry, fashioned from human bones. The pieces gleamed in the torchlight, an unsettling beauty to them. But it wasn't the jewelry that made their blood run cold. It was the eyes. At the center of the room, upon a raised altar of stone, sat a massive necklace, one far more ornate than the rest. Its chain was composed of countless tiny bones, but in the center, resting at the heart of the necklace, was a skull. A human skull, but its eyes were impossibly intact. The skull seemed to stare directly at the adventurers, its hollow eye sockets filled with an unnatural light. The scholars froze. "Do you see that?" one of them whispered, voice trembling. Another stepped forward, his hand reaching out toward the necklace, drawn to it. This must be it. The artifact, the vein of the mountain. But as his fingers brushed the skull, a sharp crack rang out, reverberating through the chamber. The eyes of the skull glowed brightly, like embers catching fire. The ground beneath them trembled as if the very castle had awakened. Suddenly, the whispers began. They were soft at first, like the wind carrying distant voices, but then they grew louder, a chorus of souls, anguished and tormented. The adventurers staggered backward, their torches flickering violently, casting long shadows against the walls. "Return it," the voices chanted, growing louder, more desperate. "Return what was taken." The temperature plummeted, and the adventurers found themselves surrounded by a cold so deep it numbed their skin, a chill that sank into their bones. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the air grew thick with a suffocating pressure. Panic gripped their hearts as they tried to flee, but the castle had shifted. The doors slammed shut, the windows were barred. They were trapped. From the shadows, figures began to materialize, spectral forms, their faces contorted in agony. Each figure bore the marks of a violent and twisted, broken bodies, missing limbs, and hollowed eyes. The spirits of the dead had been trapped within the castle for centuries, bound by the curse of the vein, and now they were angry. "You dare disturb us?" one of the spirits hissed. "You who seek to claim what was never meant to be yours." The adventurers backed into the corners of the chamber, desperate to find a way out. But the spirits closed in, their hollow eyes fixed upon them, and their wails filled the air, maddening and endless. Then, as if in response to their torment, the skull at the heart of the necklace began to shake. A crack appeared along its surface, spreading like a spider's web, until it shattered with a violent explosion. From within the shattered skull poured a dark, viscous substance, something black as night. thick like tar. The liquid spread across the floor, and as it did, the spirits howled in unison. One of the adventurers, a young scholar named Alistair, realized the truth too late. The necklace, the artifact, was never meant to be worn. It was never meant to be taken. It was a prison, a trap to bind the spirits of the dead, and now it had been released. The spirits surged forward, their forms swirling into a mass of swirling darkness. The last thing the adventurers saw was the cold, unblinking gaze of the skull-shattered eyes as the darkness enveloped them, swallowing them whole. When the villagers searched the castle the next morning, they found nothing but empty bones and the lingering whispers in the wind. The scholars had disappeared without a trace, and the necklace, it was gone. The castle, once again, was silent. The curse of Princess Adalyn, her insatiable hunger for power, her obsession with the bones of the dead, had spread beyond the grave. The mountain's wrath had not been sated. The spirits remained restless, their voices echoing in the stillness, waiting for the next fool who would dare disturb their eternal prison. But in the darkness, deep within the forgotten halls of the castle, one truth remained. Adalyn's legacy was far from over. The years passed like a dream, fleeting and distorted, but the shadows that clung to the kingdom of Valsoria never dissipated. Though the castle had fallen into ruin, its legacy endured, woven into the fabric of whispered legends. Some said the spirits of the forgotten princess and her cursed collection haunted the land, waiting for those foolish enough to disturb their slumber. Yet the kingdom slowly moved on, unaware of the full extent of the curse that had once gripped its heart. But deep within the bowels of the castle, the curse was still alive. After the disappearance of the scholars, the mountain itself seemed to sleep, but the restlessness of its ancient power never fully ceased. The spirits trapped within the vein of the mountain, the ones Adalyn had so desperately sought to control, had not been destroyed when the artifact was shattered. No, they had only been biding their time, waiting for the next soul to wander too close, and they would not be denied forever. In the spring of 1524, a man named Sealan arrived in Valsoria, a traveler with a history as dark and fragmented as the land itself. A former knight, he was now a wanderer, searching for something he wasn't quite sure what. He had heard the rumors of the last princess and the cursed castle. The stories called to him, promising a truth that might give him the answers he had been seeking. A man consumed by his own pain and loss, Sealan believed that the secrets of Valsoria's forgotten princess might hold the key to understanding his own tortured soul. His journey led him to the village below the Alps. The villagers had grown accustomed to the quiet threat the castle posed, but Sealan was different. Unlike the adventurers before him, he was not deterred by warnings. The tales of the bones, the spirits, the cursed jewelry, these were just the whispers of the weak, the fearful. Sealan was no stranger to death. He had seen more than his fair share of battle, of bloodshed, of people whose lives had been torn apart by the relentless march of time. He would enter the castle. He would uncover its secrets. The villagers, upon seeing Sealan's grim determination, shook their heads in quiet dismay, but they made no effort to stop him. The castle had claimed many before him, and they knew it would claim him too, but they did not speak their fears aloud. And so, Sealan ascended the mountain. The fog clung to the earth like a funeral shroud as he climbed the winding path, the cold biting at his skin. The deeper he went, the more the whispers of the castle seemed to seep into his mind, like an insidious voice that could not be silenced. "Return it." The words were faint, carried by the wind. Sealan brushed them aside, thinking them no more than the result of an overactive imagination. When he finally arrived at the castle's gates, the iron was cold to the touch, and the stones beneath his boots were slick with years of neglect. But something within the ruin called to him. He felt a compulsion to enter, as if some unseen force was beckoning him toward the heart of the cursed place. Inside, the darkness swallowed him whole. His lantern flickered against the oppressive silence, and his footsteps echoed in the vast emptiness of the halls. Sealan's heart beat faster with each passing moment, his senses tingling with this strange, unshakable feeling that he was not alone. The walls seemed to hum with a low, persistent energy, like a heartbeat just beneath the surface. He wandered through the castle's ancient corridors, searching for anything that might explain the curse that had claimed so many before him. But the deeper he went, the more oppressive the air became. The temperature dropped until his breath came out in frosty clouds. Shadows twisted unnaturally, like dark, malicious figures lingering just beyond his vision. And then, in the dim glow of his lantern, Sealan saw it. At the center of the grand hall, upon a pedestal, rested the necklace, the cursed necklace that had been the source of Adalyn's power. The necklace that had been lost to time. It lay there, gleaming in the pale light, as if waiting for him. His heart stuttered in his chest. The bones, polished to a gleaming sheen, seemed to glow with an ethereal light, and at the heart of the necklace, nestled in the center, was the skull with the hollow eyes, its gaze still fixed upon him. The air around it crackled with energy. Sealan knew instinctively that this was the fate of the mountain, the artifact that had damned Princess Adalyn, and by extension, anyone who sought it. He felt a cold shiver race down his spine, a voice in his head screaming at him to turn back. But curiosity and desperation won out. Sealan reached for the necklace. The moment his fingers touched the bones, everything changed. The air grew dense, suffocating. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and the ground beneath him trembled violently. The whispers, once distant and faint, now screamed in his ears, their words incomprehensible but filled with an insatiable hunger. A wave of agony surged through Sealan's body, as if something was tearing him apart from the inside. He stumbled backward, the skull in his hand, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. And then a dark figure loomed in the doorway, watching him. It was Adalyn, but not the Adalyn of old. She was no longer the beautiful princess, but a twisted, ethereal version of herself, her body shrouded in darkness, her skin pale and gaunt, her eyes black pools of endless sorrow. "You came for the truth," her voice echoed through the hall, distant yet close. "But you have only found the prize." Sealan's heart raced as he tried to move, but his body was frozen, held by some unseen force. The spirits of the dead, the ones Adalyn had bound to her, surged forward, their forms swirling around him like a swarm of ghosts. Adalyn stepped closer, her form flickering like a shadow. "You are like all the others, hungry for power. But now you will understand what it means to serve the mountain." And then the final horror unfurled before him. The spirits that had once been mere whispers, trapped within their bones, now filled the room, raging and angry, their eyes wide and pleading. They circled Sealan, their cries growing louder, their anger palpable. And in that moment, Sealan realized a terrible truth. Adalyn had not just bound the spirits to her jewelry, she had enslaved them to the mountain itself. Her thirst for power had not only trapped her soul, but the souls of countless others, condemning them to an eternity of torment. He was not just a victim, he was another piece in her unholy collection. As the darkness closed in, Sealan's final thoughts were of the cost of ambition, the cost of seeking power beyond one's control. For he, too, had fallen into the trap, and the cursed princess's legacy had claimed yet another soul. Time seemed to slow as the dark, vengeful spirits closed in around Sealan. His body was frozen in place, trapped by the unrelenting pull of the cursed necklace, its power binding him to the very heart of the mountain. The chilling whispers of the lost souls grew louder, their voices swirling in his mind, filling him with anguish. Every one of them had once been alive, once had dreams, ambitions, lives filled with meaning. Now they were nothing more than empty vessels, bound to a dark, unending existence. Adalyn stood before him, her figure now fully materialized, an apparition of royal beauty, turned twisted by obsession and dark power. She looked at him with those hollow eyes, eyes that had once been filled with innocence, now consumed by eternal hunger. "You wanted the truth," her voice reverberated through the room, cold and detached. "But there is no truth here, only the remnants of what I was, and what you will become." Sealan's breath quickened, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. But there was no escape. The spirits circled him, their ethereal forms fading in and out of existence, and the power of the necklace seemed to draw them closer, binding them together with each passing moment. He was no longer in control. The mountain had claimed him. The spirits, the lost souls that Adalyn had bound with her cursed jewelry, had begun to seep into his very being. He could feel them, pushing at the edges of his consciousness, their cold fingers clawing at his thoughts. They wanted to be free. They wanted to consume him, and in a twisted way, they would. "You understand now, don't you?" Adalyn's voice softened, her gaze piercing into him. "This is the legacy I left behind. The cursed power of the vein of the mountain will never be released. It will remain a prison of the dead, forever." Sealan struggled to speak, his throat tight, but the words were swallowed by the overwhelming presence of the spirits that surrounded him. His body trembled as he fought to remain conscious, as if the very essence of his soul was being torn apart. But Adalyn was not done. "You see, I was never truly alive again after I bound myself to the vein," she continued, her voice almost mournful. "The mountain consumed me. I am its eternal servant now. And you," she stepped closer, her fingers brushing his cheek with an icy touch, "will join me. The power you seek is a curse, Sealan, and now you will be its next victim." The shadows in the room seemed to grow darker still, thickening with every word. And then, with a sudden, jolting realization, Sealan understood the full scope of the curse that had taken root in the castle. The spirits, bound by Adalyn's obsession with power, were not just trapped in the bones of the dead. They were bound to her, their souls forever linked to the curse. And in turn, anyone who dared seek the fate of the mountain would share the same fate, becoming another vessel, another soul condemned to eternal torment. He tried to push away, but his body refused to obey. The spirits surged within him, their voices deafening. He felt his mind splinter, as if he was being torn between the reality of the present and the screams of the tortured souls that had once been alive. And then, the darkness overwhelmed him completely. The last thing Sealan saw before his consciousness shattered was Adalyn's cold, sad smile, her eyes reflecting the empty, hollow existence he had been forced to endure. Then, nothing. The years passed again, but the curse of the vein of the mountain was far from over. The whispers never ceased. Travelers, adventurers, and fools seeking fortune continued to venture up to the cursed castle, drawn by the same insatiable hunger that had consumed Adalyn. Each one met the same fate as Sealan, and the cycle repeated itself. The castle, though abandoned on the surface, was far from empty. It was a prison, a tomb, for those who dared seek what was never meant to be found. The spirits of the mountain, bound to the artifact, continued their eternal vigil, waiting for the next soul to cross their path. But something had changed in the castle, something sinister and unpredictable. In the very heart of the ruins, beneath the broken stone floors and crumbling walls, a new power began to stir. It had remained dormant for centuries, hidden deep within the roots of the vein, a force that had been overlooked, perhaps even forgotten something far darker than the spirits that had long been trapped within. It was a force that whispered in the dark, in the silence of the forgotten rooms, in the space between each heartbeat, and it was growing stronger. For centuries, the vein of the mountain had remained a curse, a bitter legacy left behind by the princess who sought power beyond measure. Its grip on the souls of the dead had never loosened. Those who had entered the castle foolish travelers, treasure hunters, or the curious had all vanished, their souls absorbed by the mountain, consumed by the restless spirits of the forgotten. Each had been lost, bound to the same fate as Adalyn, forever imprisoned by the artifact she had so desperately sought. Yet, in the forgotten heart of the castle, beneath the earth, something was changing. It began subtly, a quiet stirring deep within the mountain's core, a pulse, faint but unmistakable, as though the very land itself was awakening from a long slumber. The spirits that had been bound for so long began to grow restless, their voices more insistent, their cries growing louder in the stillness. But what they had not anticipated was that there was something else within the mountain, a force older than the curse itself, and it had been waiting. In the deepest, most hidden chamber of the castle, far from the eyes of the living and the dead alike, a door long sealed began to tremble. This door was not part of the castle's original architecture. No, it was far older, its stone surface covered in ancient runes and symbols no living soul could comprehend. It had been buried beneath the weight of time, forgotten by those who had walked the castle's halls. But now, something was stirring behind it. The vein of the mountain, the cursed relic that had bound Adalyn, and the countless others who had followed in her footsteps, was not the only force of darkness in this place. The mountain had secrets, dark, primordial secrets, and the artifact was merely the key. Adalyn, now a mere shadow of his former self, was trapped in the realm of the dead. His soul had become part of the very fabric of the curse, a helpless spectator to the endless suffering that surrounded him. He could feel the presence of the spirits, their endless wailing, their eternal anguish. He could feel them growing desperate, their cries reaching a fever pitch. But something was different. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath him trembled with an unnatural force. The whispers of the dead were no longer just whispers, they were now cries of alarm, of terror. They had felt it too. The ancient door, sealed away for so long, was opening. Suddenly, a flash of light exploded from the depths of the castle, bright and blinding. The ground shook violently, as if the very heart of the mountain had been stirred from its deep slumber. The spirits that had once been trapped in the necklace, the ones Adalyn had bound to her will, howled in fury, as if they were powerless to stop it. And then, through the darkness, a figure appeared. The figure was tall, its form shadowy and indistinct, but its presence was unmistakable. It was not one of the spirits trapped in the vein. No, this was something older, something far more terrifying. The figure stood in the doorway, shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing like embers in the blackness. Adalyn could feel its gaze upon him, cold and merciless. It was the source of the mountain, its power, the thing that had been sealed away for millennia. It was an ancient being, a spirit older than the land itself, born from the very bones of the mountain. It was the true force behind the curse, the true master of the vein of the mountain. As the figure stepped forward, the earth seemed to groan in protest. The spirits trapped within the castle recoiled, their cries growing louder and more frantic, but they could not escape. The force of the figure's presence was overwhelming. "You have released me." The figure's voice was deep and resonant, like the rumble of a mountain breaking apart. "And now, I will take what is mine." The figure's form began to shift, the darkness around it swirling like a storm. From its core, tendrils of shadow reached out, coiling around the very walls of the castle, raking through stone like it was nothing more than dust. The power that had been trapped for so long was now free, and it was hungry. Sealan's soul screamed in agony as the figure's presence engulfed him. The spirits, the ones who had once been trapped, could feel it too. They surged in desperation, trying to fight the entity, but it was futile. This being, this creature, was not a soul like theirs. It was a force of nature, something born of the mountain itself, and its hunger was insatiable. The vein of the mountain had been nothing more than a prison, a trap to keep its power locked away. But now that the figure had been freed, the prison was broken. The curse was no longer just a relic of the past, it was a living, breathing force, and it would consume everything in its path. The spirits screamed in unison as the figure stepped further into the chamber, its eyes glowing with a fire that could scorch the heavens. It extended its hand toward the remnants of the cursed necklace, still lying upon the pedestal in the center of the room. The vein had been only a tool, a means to an end, and now it would serve its true purpose. The shadows rose, swirling around the figure, and as the last remnants of the cursed necklace shattered in the figure's grasp, the spirits were absorbed into the darkness. The mountain's power surged to its fullest extent, and Sealan's soul, along with the countless others who had been trapped, was drawn into it last forever. And then silence. But it was not the silence of peace. It was a silence of finality, a silence that marked the end of an era. The vein of the mountain had fulfilled its purpose, and the mountain itself had claimed what it was owed. The castle was still. The spirits were gone, their torment at an end. But now, something new had taken their place. The force that had been released from its prison was more than a spirit, it was a presence, an ancient power that would continue to linger in the mountain's depths, its hunger never sated. The legacy of Princess Adalyn, her cursed obsession with power, had been but the beginning. The true horror of the mountain's curse had only just begun to unfold. No one would dare venture up to the castle again. The whispers of the past would fade, but the mountain would remain, waiting in the cold silence for the next fool who would disturb its eternal slumber. And as the dark figure retreated into the shadows, a single thought echoed through the cold wind of the Alps. The mountain never forgets.